They thought the party was their victory. They did not realize it was my battlefield. My son asked me to leave to save face for his wife. He had no idea that when I walked out that door, I was taking his entire future with me. It was never about the discarded gift. It was about him choosing the wrong side. And I never forgive betrayal. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 58 years old, I believed I understood the value of things. I built my entire life, my entire company, on that understanding. Value wasn't about price. It was about history, effort, and unbreakable bonds. On the day of my grandson, Leo's 5th birthday, I learned I was a fool. The party was in full swing, a loud, bright affair filling my Beacon Hill townhouse. The air, usually scented with old wood and lemon oil, was thick with the smell of expensive champagne and the cloying sweetness of a 5-foot-tall custom cake. Dozens of Boston's elite, the old money and the new power I had catered to for 30 years, milled about my drawing room. Their laughter was a practiced, airy sound. I held a glass of Sancerre, the crystal cold against my palm, and watched my son, David. He was standing with his wife, Chloe. She was, as always, performing. A 30-year-old lifestyle influencer. She lived her life through a camera lens. And today, she was the gracious hostess in a home that was not hers. My home. I had waited for the perfect moment. I signaled to my staff, and they brought it out. The gift. It was a wooden rocking horse, a beautiful, hand-carved antique that I had spent the last 2 months personally restoring. The dark mahogany gleamed. The new leather reins were supple, and the saddle was polished to a soft sheen. This was not just a toy. It was the last thing my father, a carpenter from Southie, had made before he died. He had made it for David. I carried it myself, my heart swelling with a pride that felt physical. I saw Leo's eyes light up. He was 5. He understood magic. "Oh, Mother." Chloe's voice, sharp and high, cut through the room. I turned. She was standing with her arms crossed, a perfect, practiced smile frozen on her face. Then she laughed. It was not a kind sound. It was brittle and loud. "That's just adorable," she announced, projecting for the entire room. "But we aren't in the 19th century, are we?" She walked over, her heels clicking aggressively on my floors. "It looks like it came from a dump. It's probably full of lead paint. We can't have Leo playing on that." Before I could speak, she reached out. With one long, perfectly manicured finger, a shade of pale pink I knew cost $200, she pushed the horse. Not a nudge. A shove. It toppled, hitting the antique hardwood floor with a sick, splitting sound. A crack that seemed to silence every heartbeat in the room. A small piece of the carved wooden ear snapped off and skittered away. Silence. The chattering. The music. The laughter, it all evaporated. Every eye in that room, the judges, the surgeons, the old guard matriarchs, darted to me. Then, like a slow-turning tide, they all looked at my son. I locked my eyes on David. I willed him to look at me, to say something, to defend the memory of the grandfather he'd loved, to defend the mother who had built the very world he was standing in. He looked at the floor. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He would not meet my gaze. Chloe leaned into him, her lips brushing his ear. She whispered. But in that dead, quiet room, her voice carried like a stage direction. "Do something. She's ruining Leo's party." David flinched. He cleared his throat. He took one step toward me. but his eyes were still on the broken piece of wood. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "Maybe you should go rest. You're making everyone uncomfortable." He finally looked up, his eyes empty. "It's just an old toy." The blood did not just drain from my face, it felt like it vanished from my entire body, replaced by ice. The cold of the wine glass in my hand was nothing. This was a cold that started in the bone. It was not the horse. The horse was just wood. It was the words. "Maybe you should go." I was being dismissed, ejected, from a party I was financing in the house I owned, by the son whose entire life I had single-handedly built. The humiliation was sharp, a physical blow to the chest. I looked at his face, the face I had known for 36 years, and for the first time, I saw a stranger, a weak, frightened stranger who had just made a catastrophic mistake, standing there, watching the ice form in my son's eyes. I wasn't in my Beacon Hill townhouse. I was 20 miles and 30 years away, back in South Boston. I didn't grow up with marble foyers and trust funds. I grew up in a triple-decker in Southie, where the air smelled like salt and factory smoke, and your word was the only currency that mattered. My father was a carpenter. He taught me that you build things to last. My mother was a nurse. She taught me you do not complain, you endure. I married Michael, a construction foreman with hands as rough and as kind as my father's. We had David. Our life was small, and it was perfect. Then, when David was 6 years old, Michael went to work on a rainy Tuesday and never came home. A scaffolding collapse. One phone call. And I was a 28-year-old widow. The insurance check was a joke. Barely enough to cover the funeral and 6 months' rent. I was left with a grieving child, a set of my grandmother's recipes, and a spine made of steel. So I started Vance Premier Events. It sounds grand now, but it began in the galley kitchen of my tiny apartment. It was me, a second-hand mixer, and a determination that bordered on madness. I catered small luncheons for doctors' wives, baking all night and delivering the food in my rusting Ford Escort, that rocking horse, that old toy. My father carved it for David in the last months of his life. He made it from an ancient oak tree that had been in our tiny backyard, the one David always tried to climb. It was his last gift, a piece of his quiet, steady love made tangible. For David to dismiss it, to let that woman break it and then call it nothing, was not just an insult. It was an erasure. It was him spitting on the very foundation he was built on. We were a team, David and I. As the business grew, so did he. I worked 80-hour weeks, sometimes more, sleeping in 4-hour shifts. After school. David wasn't playing video games. He was in the commercial kitchen I finally leased, polishing silver, or in the van with me, helping me deliver floral arrangements. He saw the work. He saw the sacrifice. Every dollar I made was for him. I worked until my hands were raw so he could go to a private high school, so he could be surrounded by the children of the families I now served. I bled myself dry to pay for his tuition at Boston University, to give him the polish and the pedigree I never had. And Vance Premier Events became a force. We were no longer just a catering company. We were a New England institution. I planned inaugural balls for governors, fundraisers for hospitals, and golden anniversaries for the oldest families in the state. My clients were senators, CEOs, and university presidents. My reputation was not just my livelihood, it was my armor. In this town, the name Eleanor Vance meant discretion, perfection, and absolute power. My word was gold. When David graduated, he joined the company. It was the proudest day of my life. This was the plan. I wasn't just building a business. I was building his legacy. I never remarried. I never even dated. My entire world, every decision, every long night, every carefully cultivated relationship was centered on two things, the company and my son. I believed that bond, forged in loss and tempered by decades of shared sacrifice, was ironclad. I believed he, more than anyone, understood what it took to get here. I thought our connection was the one thing in my life that was truly, completely unbreakable. I was wrong. Fatally, devastatingly wrong. The snake entered the garden, ironically enough, at my own event. It was the annual Children's Hospital Gala, my flagship production, held in the soaring glass atrium of the Museum of Fine Arts. I had spent 6 months planning every detail, from the acoustics of the string quartet to the specific shade of hydrangeas. David was there as my second in command, my heir apparent. I saw him standing near the Chihuly sculpture, his posture different. He was usually so reserved, but he was animated, leaning into a young woman who was bathed in the blue light of the glass. Or perhaps she was bathing him in her light. He brought her over, his face flushed with a kind of adolescent excitement I hadn't seen in him since his college days. "Mum, I'd like you to meet Chloe. She's a personal brand consultant." Chloe extended a hand. Her grip was practiced, firm. "Eleanor, it is an absolute honor," she said, her voice smooth and modulated. "Your work is legendary." I took her in. She was a specimen of modern engineering, 30 years old, with hair the color of expensive champagne, a face that looked like it had been sculpted by algorithm, and a minimalist white gown that I knew, instinctively, cost more than my first car. She was, as she quickly explained, a major influencer. She had, she claimed, hundreds of thousands of followers who hung on her every word about travel, fashion, and authentic living. My first impression was not dislike. It was a cold, hard click of recognition. She was too perfect. Her smile was brilliant, but it was a tool, something she deployed. It never, not once, reached her eyes. Her eyes were busy. While she spoke to me, praising my vision for the gala, I watched them. They were not admiring the art, they were appraising it. They flickered to the Van Gogh on the far wall, to the Patek Philippe on my chairman's wrist, to the cut of the diamonds on the mayor's wife. She was not seeing a room. She was seeing a balance sheet. David, my son, who had always been a little shy, a little too comfortable in my shadow, was completely swallowed by her. She turned her high-wattage attention back to him, and he physically straightened. She laughed, a high, clear sound, at something mundane he said about the catering logistics. "David is just so brilliant," she said to me, but she stroked his arm. "The way his mind works, it's fascinating." Logistics. She made my son's role in a catering company sound like he was planning the Normandy invasion. She was inflating his ego like a cheap balloon, and he was floating, untethered. I am a woman who trusts her instincts. My gut was screaming a 5-alarm fire, but this was my son. For him, I tried. A week later, I invited Chloe to lunch, just the two of us. I chose a quiet, old-money restaurant on Charles Street, a place where the food is serious and the patrons don't take photographs. She arrived 10 minutes late, breathless, claiming her coaching call with a client in Dubai ran long. The first thing she did was pull out her phone and place it on the white linen tablecloth. Screen up. The entire lunch was a performance. She didn't eat the food. She curated it. She spent a full 2 minutes arranging her lobster salad into the perfect overhead shot for her followers. "My brand is built on authenticity, you know?" she said, while applying a filter. "It's about living your best, most curated life." I tried to steer the conversation away from her digital world. "David tells me your family is from Connecticut." "Mm-hmm," she said, her thumb scrolling rapidly through her feed. "A lovely little town. Very quiet." "And your parents? What do they do?" "Oh, they're just simple people," she said, the answer polished and smooth. "Very private. Old New England stock. You know, they wouldn't know what to do with all this." She waved a hand around the hushed, elegant dining room. The answers were perfect, vague, and told me absolutely nothing. It was like talking to a press release. She excused herself to the ladies' room, a cloud of expensive, cloying perfume in her wake. She left her phone on the table. I am not a snoop. I pride myself on my integrity. I did not touch the phone, but it lit up. The screen flashed, bright and stark against the dark wood of the table. A notification. It was not from Instagram. It was not a text from a friend. It was an alert from Debt Collection Services. The message was blunt. Final notice. Your payment of $2,600 is overdue. It vanished in a second, replaced by her lock screen a photo of herself, laughing on a beach in a staged, candid pose. My blood ran cold. This influencer with her hundreds of thousands of followers, this brand consultant dripping in designer labels, was being hounded by creditors. Chloe returned. Her smile lacquered back into place. "So," she said, picking up her phone. "Where were we?" I said nothing. I paid the bill. I knew then. This was not a romance. This was an infiltration. David wasn't her partner. He was her business plan. The seed of suspicion was no longer a seed. It was a root, and it was taking hold. David was utterly, completely mesmerized. In 30 years of business, I have learned that the most dangerous threats are the ones that smile at you. The debt collection notice on Chloe's phone was a crack in a very polished, very expensive veneer. I am not a hysterical mother. I am a strategist. And when faced with a potential threat to my company, and my son is the company I do not get emotional, I get data. My network, the one I built through Vance Premier Events, is not just a list of clients. It is a web of favors, information, and quiet influence that covers all of New England. I made one call, not to a friend, to an asset. James Harrison runs a top-tier digital marketing and cybersecurity firm. I catered his daughter's wedding in Newport, a logistical nightmare involving a hurricane watch and a live orchestra flown in from Vienna. I also forgot to bill him for the $10,000 caviar bar. "James," I said, my voice calm, "I have a name for you. Chloe. She's a brand consultant, an influencer." "Eleanor," he replied. "You don't call me for influencers. What's the real ask?" "I want to know if the brand is real. Look under the hood. Discreetly." James called me back in less than 12 hours. The warmth was gone from his voice. "Eleanor, this woman isn't a brand. She's a shell." The report he sent was chilling. Over 80% of her hundreds of thousands of followers were fake. They were bots. purchased in bulk from click farms in Russia and Bangladesh. The engagement was hollow. And the travel, I asked, thinking of the Dubai coaching calls. We checked the metadata on her public posts, James said. The Tuscan Villa was a restaurant in the North End. The Parisian getaway photos were taken at the Epcot in Florida. As for her luxury posts, she's a master of the lobby shot. She checks into a 5-star hotel, takes 100 pictures in the lobby and at the bar, and leaves. She's never stayed a night. A digital house of cards. But a digital lie was one thing. I needed the human reality. This required a different kind of specialist. I hired a private investigator. A quiet, methodical man named Sullivan, who I'd used once before to vet a potential business partner. I gave him the name, the P.O. box she used for her business, and a check for $5,000. I asked him to find her simple family from Connecticut. Sullivan's report landed on my desk a week later. It was a thin manila folder, but its contents were heavy. There was no family in Connecticut. That was a complete fabrication. Chloe, it turned out, was from Rhode Island, Pawtucket. She wasn't old New England stock. She was the daughter of a woman named Brenda, a woman with a rap sheet of small-scale cons, insurance fraud, check kiting, a pyramid scheme selling wellness crystals, nothing big enough to stick. But the pattern was undeniable, a lifetime of trying to get rich without working. But the final page was the twist of the knife. Sullivan had run a full financial background. Chloe wasn't just in debt, she was submerged. The total was over $150,000, maxed out credit cards, payday loans, unpaid car leases, even an eviction judgment. I sat in my office, the sunlight streaming in, and I felt a cold, Arctic wind. This was not a love story. This was an acquisition. My son, with his trust, his name, and his future access to the Vance Premier Events accounts, was her financial rescue plan. She wasn't just marrying him. She was leveraging him. I did what any CEO would do. I began preparing a presentation. I printed James's analytics reports, showing the fake followers. I printed Sullivan's findings, the mugshot of her mother, the list of creditors, the copies of the bounced checks from Pawtucket. I put it all into a clean, professional black binder. I would sit David down in this office, and I would lay out the facts. I would show him the data. My son was smart. He was logical. He was my partner. I believed, I truly believed, that the truth would be enough to break her spell. I thought I was dealing with a simple con artist. I had no idea I was dealing with a master, and I had fatally underestimated how deep her control over my son already was. I scheduled the meeting for a Thursday afternoon, in my office, my territory. The black binder sat in the exact center of my polished mahogany desk, as innocuous as any other weekly report. When David walked in, he was casual, smiling. "Hey, Mum, what's this all about? You sounded so serious on the phone." "Sit down, David," I said, my voice even. I slid the binder across the desk. "This is about Chloe." His smile faltered, replaced by a wary tension. "What about her?" I asked some professionals to look into her background, as a precaution, for the business. I used the word business deliberately. This was not a mother meddling. This was a CEO protecting her company. "You need to read what's in there." He opened it. I watched his face. I saw the exact moment the color drained from it. He went pale, a sickly, chalk white, As he read the first page of the digital analysis, the 80% bot followers, he flipped the page, his movements jerky. He saw the report on her faked travel. Then he got to Sullivan's report. He saw the name Brenda. He saw the list of creditors. He saw the total, $150,000. His knuckles, gripping the binder, were white. A strange, strangled sound came from his throat. I thought it was dawning, the horror of being deceived. I was wrong. It was rage. He stood so abruptly his chair screeched and toppled over, and then he threw the binder. He hurled it across the room, and it smashed against the wall of books, pages flying everywhere. The evidence, the data, the facts fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. "How dare you?" he roared, his face a dark, mottled red I had never seen. "How dare you spy on her? You're trying to ruin my life." "David, this is proof," I said, my voice hardening, the shock of his violence rattling me. "This is evidence. She is a con artist. She is using you." "She is not," he shouted, his voice cracking. You're jealous. You're jealous that I finally have someone who loves me. You can't stand it. You never wanted me to have anyone but you." The accusation hung in the air, so vile, so far from the truth, that it left me breathless. All the 80-hour weeks, the sacrifices, the unconditional love, all twisted into some sick, possessive jealousy. "David," I said, standing up, my voice like ice. "That is not true, and you know it. I am trying to protect you. I am trying to protect this family. By digging up dirt, by trying to find anything you can to break us up." "She lied to you," I stated. A simple fact. Her past doesn't matter. Her present is a lie. David, I love her. She's after your... Eleanor, stop. The voice came from the doorway. It was quiet, trembling, and perfectly timed. Chloe stood there. My blood turned to slush. She wasn't just here. She was dressed for the part. Her face was scrubbed of makeup, her hair pulled back, and her eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears. David hadn't come alone. He had brought her. He had told her about this meeting. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a trap. She glided into the room, a picture of wounded innocence. "David, honey, it's okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. She turned to me, and the tears began to fall, real, wet tears that she had clearly summoned. "I knew you didn't like me, Eleanor," she sobbed, clutching David's arm. "I knew you thought I wasn't good enough. And you're right. My past isn't perfect. My family." She choked on the word. "We had struggles. I made mistakes. I've been trying so hard to be better. I've been trying to be worthy of him." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. She took every piece of evidence and twisted it into a Horatio Alger story of a girl trying to overcome her past for love. She made me the villain, the cruel matriarch holding her imperfect past against her. She looked up at David, her eyes brimming. "She'll never stop. She'll never let us be happy." Then, the masterstroke. She stepped away from him. "You have to choose," she said, her voice suddenly strong, final. "You choose. Her. And this life." She gestured around my office, at the empire I had built. "Or me." She stood there, defiant, beautiful, and utterly false. The silence in the room was a living thing, suffocating. David looked at her, his face a wreck of confusion and adoration. Then he looked at me. He looked at me, his mother, the woman who had given him everything. His eyes were not angry anymore. They were just empty. Resigned. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. He walked over to Chloe. He took her hand. He did not look back. He just walked out of the office, pulling her behind him, and left me standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of the truth. 2 weeks later, they were married. A sterile, 10-minute ceremony at City Hall. I found out from a brief, formal email sent from a joint account I didn't recognize. I was not invited. The rupture was complete. The war had begun. For 3 months. The silence was absolute. David was gone. My office was quiet, and the house felt like a mausoleum. Then, one rainy afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was David. He was holding a baby carrier. Beside him, Chloe stood, looking exhausted and, for the first time, genuinely vulnerable. "Mum," David said, not meeting my eyes. "This is Leo." I hadn't even known she was pregnant. They had hidden it. Another secret. Another way to cut me out. My grandson. I looked at the tiny, sleeping face, and the armor I had spent months building cracked. "We have a problem," Chloe said, her voice thin. "Our apartment. There's black mold. It's toxic. We can't stay there with the baby." "The landlord is remediating," David added quickly. "But it's going to take a few weeks. We have nowhere else to go. Mum, please. Just for a little while. For Leo." For Leo. That was the key. They used him as a battering ram. And I, a 58-year-old fool, opened the gates. "Of course," I said, my voice sounding distant. "For Leo." A few weeks became a month. A month became 6. The remediation on their apartment, I suspected, was non-existent. The invasion had begun, not with a bang, but with a diaper bag. My house, my sanctuary of polished wood and quiet history, was methodically dismantled. Chloe, recovering her strength, began to modernize the space. "It's so dark in here. Eleanor," she'd say. "It's not stimulating for the baby." The first to go were the family photographs. The silver-framed pictures of David as a child, of my parents, of my late husband. They vanished from the mantel and the side tables. They were replaced by large, frameless canvases of abstract, contemporary art. They were cheap prints, meaningless splashes of grey and beige that she had ordered online. The leather-bound books in the library were rearranged by colour, not author, to create a rainbow effect for her Instagram stories. My antique Persian rugs were sent for cleaning and never returned. Instead, a sterile white shag carpet appeared. "Easier to sanitize?" she explained. Then, the true twist. 2 months into the occupation, a new person arrived at the door, dragging 2 oversized suitcases. It was Brenda, Chloe's mother, the woman from Sullivan's report. "Brenda," Chloe cried, rushing to hug her. "Oh, thank God you're here." She turned to me, her expression a perfect blend of apology and defiance. Her awful landlord just evicted her for no reason. Can you believe it? She just needs to stay for a little bit, just until she finds a place. And so, the alliance was complete. The house was no longer mine. It became theirs. I would walk into the kitchen in the morning to find them, Brenda and Chloe, whispering by the coffee machine in their bathrobes. They would stop talking the moment I entered, then exchange a look, and, sometimes, a barely suppressed giggle. They laughed at my furniture, which they called mausoleum chic. They complained about my coffee, my groceries, the energy of the house. I was treated as a tolerated, mildly eccentric servant. And David, my son, was a ghost. He was utterly lost in the new world Chloe had built for him. He was a father, a husband, and he walked through the halls of his childhood home without seeing me. He saw only them. He'd come home from work and immediately find Chloe, kissing her, asking about Leo, completely blind to the slow, suffocating erasure of his own mother, of his entire past. I became a guest in my own home, retreating to my study, the one room they had not yet breached. My only solace was Leo. I would hold him when Chloe permitted, which was rare. She was always there, monitoring. Oh, Mom? His head? Support his head? As if I hadn't raised a child myself. Don't kiss his hands, the germs. Every interaction was supervised, criticized, and controlled. I was a stranger, an interloper, and they were the masters of the house I had paid for. The occupation of my home was a tactical maneuver. I see that clearly now. While they were busy distracting me, colonizing my space, making me feel like a stranger in my own kitchen, the real front line was at the office. David was still the COO of Vance Premier Events. He had been a ghost at home, but he suddenly reappeared in my study, where I had retreated to work. He didn't come to apologize. He came with a plan. Mom, he began, a new, slick confidence in his voice that was pure Chloe. I've been analyzing our back-end systems. We're archaic. Our payment processing, our vendor management, it's costing us time and money. We need to modernize. He placed a neatly bound proposal on my desk. It was full of buzzwords: synergy, optimization, digital integration. I need expanded access, he said, getting to the point. To the operating accounts. I need to be able to authorize new vendor contracts to streamline this. It's time I really took the reins. Mom. A part of me, the part that was still a mother, was pathetic. It still held a tiny, flickering hope that this work, responsibility, our shared legacy would be the bridge back to him. That if I gave him this trust, he would remember who he was. I will grant you access to the operational accounts for vendor payments, I said, my voice all business. The main payroll and asset accounts remain under my sole authorization. Perfect, he said, smiling. That's all I need. It was a fatal miscalculation. My miscalculation. For the first few months, the transition seemed smooth. He produced charts and reports showing increased efficiency. I was busy, distracted by the quiet war in my home. I didn't look closely enough. Then I did. It's a ritual. My Friday night. I pour a single, neat whiskey, and I review the weekly financials. It's how I built this company. I started to notice the leaks. First, the company car. The Lexus sedan I used for client meetings was suddenly logging hundreds of miles. The gas receipts were not from Boston. They were from the Hamptons. They were from New York City. Weekend trips. Second, the expenses. Client dinners at restaurants I knew were not for business. Bills for $4,000, $5,000, at the most expensive tables in the city. Always on a Friday or Saturday night. Who were these clients? But the real hemorrhage was the consulting fees. A new vendor had appeared on the books, a company I had never heard of, C-Brand Solutions. The first invoice, 4 months ago, was for $10,000. The next month, $20,000. Last month, A single invoice for digital rebranding services was $50,000. I sat in the dark of my study, the house silent. The occupiers, my son, his wife, his mother-in-law, were asleep upstairs. I typed C-Brand Solutions into the state's corporate registry. It existed. Registered just 6 months ago. The address was a P.O. box. I paid the $20 fee to pull the articles of organization. The PDF downloaded. I opened it. The sole proprietor, the registered agent. The only name on the document was not Chloe. It was registered to Brenda O'Malley. My blood went cold. I knew that name. I had paid a private investigator $5,000 to find it. It was Brenda's maiden name. I leaned back, the whiskey untouched. I was not being robbed by a stranger. I was being systematically, professionally plundered by my own family. The trips, the dinners, the consulting fees. It was all a scam. They were siphoning tens of thousands of dollars directly from my company into her mother's pocket. This wasn't just extravagant spending. This wasn't just David being weak. This was a conspiracy. This was a systematic, cold-blooded plan to gut my company from the inside. And they were using my son as the weapon. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 1 week before Leo's 5th birthday. The house was dark. The occupiers were, I assumed, asleep. I was in my study. The door cracked. A single desk lamp illuminating the financial reports I'd been secretly printing. The C-Brand Solutions invoices were laid out like a hand of poker, a game I was clearly losing. The total was now north of $300,000. I was so deep in the numbers, in the cold, sick feeling of betrayal, that I almost missed it. Voices. Not from upstairs, where they slept. From the living room, directly below my study. They were supposed to be in bed. I hadn't heard them come in. I killed the desk lamp. The only light was the glow from the streetlights, filtering through the blinds. I stood, my body rigid, and moved to the open study door. The house, an old Victorian, was built for acoustics. Their voices carried up the main staircase as clearly as if they were in the room with me. It was Brenda and Chloe. They were not whispering. They were relaxed, triumphant. They were drinking my whiskey. I could hear the clink of my crystal tumblers. "He's finally asleep," Chloe said. I heard a long sigh, the sound of a sofa cushion compressing. God, he's so needy, like his father. "They're all needy, honey." Brenda's voice, raspy from a lifetime of cigarettes, replied. "The trick is to need them more. So, next week, the party. Are you sure you're ready for this?" "Ready, Brenda. I've been planning this since I first saw this dump." "Are all the old woman's important guests going to be there?" Brenda asked. "You're sure she'll get them to show—" "Oh, please." Chloe scoffed, and I could hear the disdain. "Eleanor's reputation is the only thing she has left. They'll all be here. The CEOs, the old money trustees, the hospital board, the investors. Every major client on her list. It's the perfect opportunity." My heart, which had been pounding, went still. "An opportunity for what David is prepped," Chloe continued, her voice dropping into a businesslike, conspiratorial tone. "He's nervous, but he'll do it. He's terrified of losing me, and he's finally realizing I'm his ticket." "So what's the play again?" Brenda asked. "Simple. After the happy birthday song, right after she gives her ridiculous, sentimental gift, David will take the mic. He'll thank everyone for coming." Chloe's voice took on a fake, somber quality. And then he'll announce that his mother, Eleanor, is finally retiring, effective immediately, for health reasons. My hand went to my mouth. I was not breathing. Health reasons, Brenda cackled. The woman is a tank. Exactly, Chloe said, the ice back in her voice. The clients will be shocked. They'll be worried. And right then, David will announce that he, along with his new, full partner me, will be taking over Vance Premier Events to lead it into the future. It'll be a seamless transition. They'll be so relieved. They'll applaud. My mind was reeling. They weren't just stealing. They were planning a coup to take my company, my name, from me. But what about the money? Brenda said, practical. The old bat still controls the main accounts. The company they'll be taking over is the one you've been bleeding dry. That's phase 2, Chloe said, and I had never heard such venomous, cold intelligence in her voice. While they're all stunned, I'll be working the room. You'll be by my side. We'll be expressing our concern for Eleanor, and we'll be telling her key clients, discreetly, that with Eleanor's condition, the company is a risk. And then, Brenda said, the excitement clear. And then, Chloe confirmed, we offer them a solution, a new, more modern, more affordable event company, C Brand Solutions. We'll have contracts ready. We'll sign them on the spot, for 20% less than what this old fossil has been charging them. By the end of the night, Vance Premier Events will be nothing but an empty shell with a list of creditors. We'll have her entire client list. We'll have everything. I backed away from the door, my legs shaking. I sat down in my chair in the darkness. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to annihilate my life's work, to destroy my reputation, to leave me with nothing. The party. My grandson's 5th birthday party. It was just a stage, a set, the perfect backdrop for a public assassination. The last flicker of grief, the last stupid maternal ache for the son I had lost, was extinguished. It was burned away in that instant, leaving behind something I had not felt in 30 years, a cold, pure, and absolute rage. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I smiled. They wanted a party. I would give them a party. I would give them a reckoning. The next morning, I was a different woman. The rage was still there, but it was now a cold, clean, efficient engine. I walked out of my study and found them in the kitchen, already drinking my coffee. I gave them my best performance. I leaned heavily on the counter, my shoulders slumped. I looked, for the first time in my life, like a defeated old woman. Chloe, I said, my voice quiet and frail. You're right. This house it's too much for me. And this party, I'm just so tired. I saw the look that passed between her and Brenda, a flash of triumphant, predatory glee. They had her. The old bat was finally breaking. Of course, Eleanor, Chloe said, her voice dripping with false concern. Why don't you let me help? I can take over the planning. Would you? I breathed, looking at her as if she were a savior. I just don't have the energy. And David, I said, as he walked into the room. I've been thinking. You're right. It's time. After the party. We need to talk about my retirement. David and Chloe locked eyes. It was done. They had won. Their guard was not just down, it was completely dismantled. They spent the next week floating on a cloud of their own arrogance, barely noticing me as I shuffled around my own home. While they were busy finalizing the party details, which I knew was a cover for them preparing their fraudulent contracts, I was at war. I did not go to my office. I called my lawyer, Marcus, and Sarah, my chief financial officer for 30 years. I told them to meet me at a private room at the Four Seasons, under a different name. The room was sterile, corporate. I laid out the C-Brand Solutions invoices. "They are gutting the company," I said, my voice flat. "And they are planning a hostile takeover at Leo's party." Marcus went pale. Sarah looked like she was going to be physically ill. "Eleanor," she whispered. "Not now," I commanded. "Now. We act." We worked for 72 straight hours. We did not sleep. Marcus and his team of corporate lawyers were brilliant. A plan was formed. First, we created a new entity, a quiet, unnamed holding company. Second, in a series of rapid, complex, and perfectly legal maneuvers, we began to move assets. Every key client contract, every vendor agreement, every real asset of Vance Premier Events was systematically transferred to this new, invisible parent company. What we left behind, what we left for David and Chloe to take over, was a hollowed-out skull. Vance Premier Events was now just a name, a shell, and, crucially, the sole bearer of all the debt they themselves had racked up the $300,000 in fraudulent invoices, the car leases, the extravagant expenses. They were plotting to seize a kingdom that, as of 72 hours later, no longer existed. While Marcus handled the law, Sarah and I handled the ammunition. We prepared 30 identical, beautifully bound black folders. Inside each was a simple, devastating presentation. The articles of incorporation for C-Brand Solutions, registered to Brenda O'Malley, copies of the invoices, bank statements showing the direct transfers, James Harrison's report on the fake followers, Sullivan's P.I. report, complete with Brenda's history of petty fraud, a complete, undeniable narrative of a long con. I went back to the house. In the workshop my father had built in the carriage house, I meticulously repaired the rocking horse. I glued the ear back on. I sanded. I stained. I polished. This was not a gift for Leo. This was a prop. It was a symbol of what they had tried to break. And it was now perfect. My final preparations were operational. I called my usual high-end catering service. Then I called a private security firm run by an ex-state police captain. I hired a team of 12. "I want them in the caterer's black and white uniforms," I instructed. "I want them indistinguishable from the waitstaff, but they are to take orders only from me." One last call. I made it from a pay-as-you-go burner phone. The recipient was Michael Callahan, an investigative reporter for the Boston Globe, a bulldog. I had once done a fundraiser for his daughter's school. "Michael," I said, "Eleanor Vance, I have a personal invitation for you, my grandson's 5th birthday party. But you aren't coming as a guest. You're coming as a reporter. Bring a recorder. I am about to give you the biggest story on financial fraud and elder abuse this city has seen in a decade." The battlefield was set. The pieces were in place. All they had to do was walk into the trap. And so we return to that moment. The drawing room, thick with champagne and ignorance. I stood there, holding the perfectly restored rocking horse. Chloe, bright and venomous, had just delivered her line. "It looks like it came from a dump. It's probably full of lead paint." She shoved it. The crack of the wood was the starting pistol. The silence was absolute. All eyes were on me. Then, my son, David? He stepped forward, his face pale. Mum, maybe you should go rest. You're making everyone uncomfortable. It's just an old toy. I looked at him. My son, the weak, pathetic stranger he had become. The ice in my veins was so cold, it was almost a comfort. I smiled. A small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. Oh, son, I said, my voice clear and carrying in the silence. I'm not going anywhere. David's face flickered with confusion. Chloe's smile tightened with irritation. I turned my head and gave a slight nod to the man standing by the door, the one wearing the catering manager's tuxedo. He, in turn, nodded at the string quartet. The music did not just stop. It was cut off, mid-note. The silence that fell on the room was now heavy, electric. I set the rocking horse down, carefully. I walked past my son, past his wife, and I stepped onto the low platform where the musicians had been playing. I picked up their microphone. The small pop of it turning on was the loudest sound in the room. "Welcome, everyone," I said. My voice, amplified, was calm and strong. "Thank you all for coming. I am so glad you're all here. I am, in fact, thrilled that you are here to witness a transition." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them, David and Chloe, standing side by side. They were smiling, a smug, self-satisfied smile. This was it. Their moment. They thought I was playing my part. My son, David, and his wife, Chloe, I continued, have been working very, very hard for the past year and a half. They have been building something. I paused, letting the room hang on the words. Chloe's smile widened. They have been building a shell company, I said, my voice dropping, called C-Brand Solutions, a fraudulent entity which, in the last 18 months, has successfully defrauded my company. Vance Premier Events, of over $1.2 million. The silence was no longer electric. It was dead. It was a vacuum. Every smile in that room vanished, frozen in place. David's face was not pale. It was white, the color of ash. Chloe, for the first time since I had met her, looked her age. She looked like a terrified, trapped animal. "I know this," I said, "because I have the receipts." I gave my second signal. The waitstaff, my 12 uniformed security officers, moved. They did not rush. They moved with methodical precision through the crowd, handing the 30 black bound folders to every key guest. I watched as the Honourable Judge Matthews opened his. I watched as the head of the hospital board opened his. And I watched as Michael Callahan of the Boston Globe, standing in the back, opened his and held his phone up, its small red light clearly recording. "In those folders," I said into the microphone, "you will find the articles of incorporation for C-Brand Solutions, registered to a Brenda O'Malley, Chloe's mother, a woman with a history of check fraud. You will find the forged invoices. You will find the bank statements showing the transfers. You will find the proof." I looked at David. He was shaking, a full-body tremor. Chloe was invisible, her face a mask of disbelief. "David," I said, and my voice was hard as marble. "You are fired, effective immediately. Chloe, Brenda, you have 10 minutes to collect your personal effects and leave my home. After that, you will be arrested for trespassing." Brenda, near the buffet, actually dropped her plate. Chloe made a sound, a strangled gasp, But I was not finished. I pulled my personal cell phone from my pocket. I dialed a number I knew by heart. I put it on speaker, holding the phone up to the microphone. Eleanor Vance's office. You're on a secure line. A crisp voice said. Mark, thank you for picking up, I said. Please proceed as we discussed. Right away, Mrs. Vance. And Mark, I said. So, the room understands. What are you proceeding with? Yes, the banker's voice said, echoing through the room. Per your instruction, I am immediately freezing all joint accounts and all credit cards associated with the name David Vance. The reason code for the freeze is fraudulent activity. It is done. Mrs. Vance. I hung up. I looked at my son. He was a ruin. A building collapsed in on itself. He was staring at me, his mouth open, speechless, as his entire future evaporated. I leaned into the microphone one last time. You made your choice, David, I said. From now on, you are on your own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. So please drop a comment below and let's all connect and share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.